Welcome. Today is September 4th, 2016. You are listening to Counterculture. I am your host, Aaron Lujan, and Sarah Geidel brought us in with a track called Tied Up on SoundCloud. She recently started following me, and I thought, hey, let's build this SoundCloud community, support each other. Sarah Geidel is a very talented musician, artist. You can find her on soundcloud.com/Sarah Geidel. Today we will cover the biggest headlines for September 13th, 2016. As I mentioned, this is episode 4 of Counterculture. Opening us up is Infowars.com, pneumonia. Hillary received neurological test before she collapsed. This is the story that is, in my opinion, the biggest of the day. Essentially, the article explains that there was a classic motor neuron test used to determine abnormalities in the nervous system administered to Hillary Clinton the day of the infamous collapse at the memorial service in New York City for September 11th. The doctor that was cited in the article said swaying and stumbling is I may mispronounce this, syncopal episode. That the test that was administered to her would be a test that would be of either a cardiovascular or neurological problem, not pneumonia. So very interesting that doctors are looking at what appears to be allegedly a nurse administering a test, which contradicts what we're hearing in the media in the last 48 hours with regards to her health. Next article is out of theblaze.com. IT specialist who set up Clinton server ignores congressional subpoena. So if we all remember, there was a gentleman by the name of Brian Pagliano who was the State Department computer specialist tasked to set up the private server for Hillary Clinton while she was Secretary of State. He was summoned to appear before a House of Representatives panel to testify. Representative of Utah, Jason Chaffetz, the Republican chair, called for his testimony, and he refused. So we're not going to hear from the State Department IT chair over the Benghazi debacle. Very interesting. Chaffetz is calling this thumbing his nose at Congress. Next article is from thedailycaller.com. Kerry's State Department, the current Secretary of State, John Kerry, funneled millions of dollars to his daughter's non-profit organization. Documents obtained by Daily Caller reveal over $9 million was funneled through the Peace Corps non-profit subsidiary of Vanessa Kerry. The non-profit is Global Health Service Partnership. There was apparently in the documents it was revealed there was no competition. It all went to her, and over $9 million of it appears on the surface to be crony capitalism. Father helping his daughter get a contract from what is taxpayer dollars. Next article is coming out of ZeroHedge.com. Did Hillary avoid the ER to conceal details of her medical treatment? The New York Post is linked in the Zero Hedge article reporting that a campaign operative decided to ignore Secret Service protocol to take her to ER. Instead, they took her to her daughter Chelsea Clinton's apartment to, quote, avoid having Clinton seen by doctors, nurses, and other medical workers who could leak details to reporters. Now, what's interesting is if you're suffering from pneumonia, which is the official statement of the campaign, why would they be worried? Why would the campaign be worried about that getting leaked? If you're just going to the hospital with pneumonia, why would they be concerned with the media seeing her being sent to the hospital for pneumonia? It suggests that maybe she doesn't have pneumonia, which makes sense considering that the campaign themselves contradicted and said at one point she didn't have pneumonia, then she did have pneumonia, then it was allergies, it was just a cough, and she's fine, she's not fine. So the lies are just stacking on top of lies, stacking on top of lies. The campaign said she felt better as soon as she got into the van, and the campaign yesterday assured us that they are preparing medical records. Well, preparing medical records are already records. They're historical record. There is nothing to be prepared for. I don't need to prepare records for my birth because a birth certificate already exists. It already occurred. I was already born. So I don't quite understand what the campaign is asking or telling us, that they need time to prepare medical records. The next article is out of the activistpost.com. Bombed a potato chip factory, a school, a Doctors Without Borders facility, and now a water well. Yesterday, Saudi Arabian Air Force hit northern Yemen as they've been doing for the last 18 months, this time an attack on a water well. The UN is reporting 30 were killed, 17 wounded, including 2 children and first responders. So the UN called it a double tap strike. A double tap strike is when you hit a target and you kill all the people and injure a bunch of the people there, and then you wait till first responders arrive, and then you kill and murder everybody that shows up to help the wounded and the murdered. Very interesting, because just recently, if you've been following the unspun, unfiltered news, President Obama proposed $1.15 billion in weapon systems and ammunition and arms to the very Saudi Arabian government, the one that is running around murdering hundreds of Yemenis, including children. Christine Beckerle and John Sifton of Human Rights Watch wrote last week, quote, "The U.S. continues to provide logistical, tactical, and intelligence support to the Saudi-led military operation against the Houthis and their allies in Yemen that has resulted in numerous laws of war violations." So in the last 18 months, the Saudi Arabians have killed over 10,000 people in the country of Yemen and have destroyed critical infrastructure like water and sanitation. It is totally and utterly ravaged. And I find this interesting because if we have a young black kid in a major U.S. city rush a police officer and the police officer shoots him, everyone in our country starts riots and political movements, and we hear it nonstop in the media. But U.S. ally Saudi Arabia can kill 10,000 people in just the last 18 months, and most people don't even know about Yemen. I guarantee you that if you were to go on the street and ask 10 average U.S. citizens if they know what Yemen is, I would say about half of them wouldn't have even heard of the country. ABC News is reporting President Obama will veto bill allowing 9/11 lawsuits against Saudi Arabia. So essentially, there were 9/11 victims, families who wanted to hold Saudi Arabia accountable and find some justice for the murder of their family members. And President Obama said, no, you cannot do that. I will veto any bill and protect the Saudi Arabian government. And if you listen to a podcast 1 or 2 ago, I had reported that the 9/11 Commission report just released some previously classified pages of the report revealing that, in fact, Saudi Arabia is responsible with dark elements within the national security state of our country that were responsible for September 11th, 2001 attacks. Activistpost.com is reporting major problems announced at one of the largest too-big-to-fail banks in the United States. On Thursday, it was reported that Wells Fargo is getting hit with fines for opening millions of bank and credit card accounts. Fraud at a scale hard to imagine. So illegitimate bank and credit card accounts that essentially salespeople at Wells Fargo were given a green light to commit fraud and open up a bunch of accounts for customers without their consent, many of them incurring fees for these illegitimate accounts. And now the federal government has announced that they will go after them. Employees of Wells Fargo boosted sales figures by covertly opening the accounts and funding them by transferring money from customers' authorized accounts without their permission, according to Consumer Financial Protection Bureau and Office of the Comptroller of Currency and Los Angeles city officials said. An analysis by the San Francisco headquartered bank found that its employees opened up over 2 million deposit and credit card accounts. Many of the transfers ran up fees or other charges for the customers so that employees could make incentive goals. 5,300 employees have been fired, 115 million in fines. Media coverage, zero. Wells Fargo recklessness is concerning because they are one of the 6 biggest banks. 44% of all bank assets in the United States is under the control of 6 banks, Wells Fargo being one of them. So the moral of the story is that if Wells Fargo is going to commit this type of wide-scale fraud and essentially get away with it, because a bunch of people losing their jobs is on the people losing their jobs. I'm sure Wells Fargo will be fine without those 5,300. 115 million in fines for Wells Fargo is not very much when you consider relative to how much money Wells Fargo actually has. It's like if you got fined $5 for speeding, you may speed again because, well, really, what's $5? I just paid almost $600 in traffic tickets for 2 speeding tickets earlier last year. And you better believe your bottom dollar, I'm watching my speed now because I just moved to a new city and they don't play games. And so had I gotten a $5 speeding ticket, I probably would be speeding a little bit more because the punishment wasn't that bad. So Wells Fargo may continue to commit wide-scale fraud. But here's the moral of the story. If they do, they will do it to our peril, your peril, because if they go down, so goes down the rest of the economy. As Bush and his cronies called it in 2008, too big to fail. GlobalResearch.ca is reporting Russian troops take up positions in Aleppo, Syria, as jihadis are given an ultimatum. Recently, John Kerry and the Russians signed some sort of ceasefire deal. It was immediately violated. Now it looks like there's going to be Russian troops confronting ISIS fighters in Syria as they move into the interior of Syria. Things are continuing to escalate in that part of the world. Naturalnews.com is reporting manufacturer of addictive prescription drugs donates $500,000 to fight cannabis legalization. So right now, the state of Arizona is voting for recreational marijuana, and they want to legalize it like the 4 other states and the District of Columbia is doing. And Natural News is reporting that a pharmaceutical company called Insys, INSYS, has recently given over $500,000 as a donation to the lobby in Arizona that is fighting for the legalization of cannabis. Now, the reason this story is interesting is Insys, this company that gave the $500,000, is also selling their only product currently on the market, a dangerous narcotic painkiller that would essentially address the same concerns that cannabis would. And what's interesting about this drug, it's called Subsys, a sublingual spray form of the synthetic opiate painkiller fentanyl. Now, if anyone's familiar with fentanyl, it is stronger than heroin, highly addictive, and can cause lethal overdoses. It was fentanyl that led to the accidental death of Prince back in April. And when you compare that to medical cannabis, when it's considered a major competitor to opiates, it makes sense that this company is giving $500,000 to prevent the legalization of cannabis. A 2014 study by researchers from Johns Hopkins University found that states that legalize medical marijuana saw significant drops in opioid overdose deaths. So actually, forgive me right now. I think in the beginning I said that Arizona was attempting to legalize it for recreation. I think it could be medical. So I'm not really sure. Let's take a look. Again, we're live and I don't have a producer. This is real talk. So it looks like, I'm not sure what it is. Let's move along. You can look it up. I include the links to all these stories in the description of all these podcasts and videos. Also from naturalnews.com, the CDC proclaims power to detain citizens, then force them to submit to involuntary medical treatments and vaccinations at gunpoint. So this is unprecedented. The Center for Disease Control is putting a proposal on the table to the federal government to say that they should be able to force vaccinate anybody of the public deemed to be a danger to public health. So any person in the U.S. who is suspected of carrying any communicable disease, even if the disease is an invisible stage, can be detained, isolated, quarantined, and medically treated, or in other words, forcibly vaccinated. Upon conditional release, the person can be monitored, and this can involve wearing electronic tracking devices. Quote, those are the broad strokes of the new policy, and obviously they're broad enough to cover anyone. So basically, the CDC is saying, if we think you have a disease and their determination of that is gray, they can pick you up, grab you, and do whatever they want with you. Goodbye, Constitution. The Daily Mail out of the UK, Jay-Z's streaming service Tidal loses $28 million and has been late on its payments almost 100 times since March 2015. This is interesting because Jay-Z is a Luciferian and is leading millions of people into this demonic spiritual realm. In my opinion, if you listen to his music and do some research on him, and he's able to do so because he portrays himself as this monumental businessman, when in fact the guy is losing royally, which also reminds me today is the 20-year anniversary of the death of Tupac Shakur, who was a much greater man than Jay-Z ever was, in my opinion. And I can't believe that it's been 20 years since he has passed. So rest in peace, Tupac, one of the very few people in popular culture and popular media who was telling the truth, which makes it very interesting that he was killed in Las Vegas 20 years ago from this time. Next article is coming out of yahoo.com. U.S. tech firms urge Congress to allow internet domain changeover. Facebook, Google, Twitter, and other major internet giants are urging Congress to support a plan for the U.S. government to cede control of the internet's technical management to the global community in a joint letter today. Could stifle online freedom by giving voting rights to authoritarian governments is the concern. So if anybody's ever bought a domain name like aaronlujan.com, they have to pay to a nonprofit called ICANN. ICANN is under the supervision, if you want to call that, or the oversight by the U.S. Commerce Department, because we, the American people, invented the internet. No, sorry, Al Gore. But it was a U.S. military experiment in the 80s and 90s. So the U.S. Commerce Department oversees ICANN, and our major tech companies are urging Congress to cede control to a global construct. And the concern there, of course, is crazy dudes in control of it, and First Amendment is at stake. SFGate.com reporting a 3.5 magnitude earthquake striking East Bay. If you're not prepared for natural disaster, go to prepsave.com, prepsave.com, and get prepared. Next article is from techinsider.io. Police are routinely building up private DNA databases. So it's becoming, I guess, more routine for smaller cities in Connecticut, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, and Florida to pull you over in a routine pullover, like if you're speeding, if you got a broken headlight, and ask for a DNA sample. Kind of going back to that other article, looks like medical tyranny is at our doorstep. The U.S. consumer taps out. This is coming out of ZeroHedge.com. Bank of America internal credit card data shows retail spending tumbles. Very interesting because Bank of America is able to keep track of all the debit card, credit card expenditures. And one of the things that they track is how many people are using those credit cards and those debit cards for retail purchases. And it's trending downwards. And it's starting to get really ugly, especially in July. And while this is happening, we're seeing sports authorities shut down and all these other Macy's is shutting down. And it's corresponding with the Bank of America data that people are just not spending money anymore at retail stores. The Intercept.com is reporting that Donald Trump, after blasting the Iraq war, is hiring a pro-Iraq war hawk as his security advisor. Former CIA director and neoconservative James Woolsey has been named the senior advisor on national security issues for the Trump administration on Monday. Trump has either pivoted or he's contradicting himself because he called the Iraq war a disaster, but then he goes and he hires one of the biggest proponents of the Iraq war. Woolsey was part of the PNAC Council, New American Project for a New American Century, a neoconservative think tank that was largely attributed to the Iraq war. They were the architects of the Iraq war. He's vice president of Booz Allen, chair of the Paladin Capital Group. These are all military industrial complex investment firms and consultancies that make hundreds of millions of dollars on the death and destruction of people like the poor people in Yemen. And now Donald Trump is getting these guys on board. So I'm not voting for Trump. I'm not voting for Hillary. Both of our choices are rotten if you are a pro-peace, anti-war voter. That is all the news that I have for today. Again, I apologize. I am not going to focus in on any other issue, particularly today. Although I do want to say that while I just went over the news in approximately 23 minutes, I checked what's trending on Facebook and Twitter, and it looks like Dancing with the Stars is the big deal. Ryan Lochte? I don't even watch TV, so I don't even know how to pronounce his name. And Vanilla Ice Baby are Dancing with the Stars. And Gabby Douglas, I don't know who she is, looked great at Miss America. And now there's going to be 50 Shades Darker. The soft porn film that glamorizes rape, I guess, is really popular right now with the American public. This is September 13th, 2016. You listen to Counterculture with Aaron Lujan. Please remember, if you are not prepared for the coming economic collapse, natural disasters, or the unknown, go to prepsave.com, prepsave.com, and take a look at what can keep you and your family alive during a disaster. Thank you very much for joining me, and you can follow everything at aaronlujan.com. Take care.